Welcome to Widemindedness with Victoria Ball, the podcast in which I interview expert guests who want to join me in celebrating that life is not black and white. Our society is increasingly divided, and the us versus them mentality seems to dominate our conversations and relationships with others. I believe that life is much richer when we widen our minds to consider multiple opinions and perspectives. So challenge your assumptions and let's become truly wide-minded together. The Rev Dr John Barrett has a lifetime's experience of ministry and education. He has been a teacher, a school chaplain, and for 27 years a head teacher, including 6 years as founding head of an international school in Singapore. He was also president of the World Methodist Council. Methodism is a movement of Protestant Christianity made up of a number of denominations. The World Methodist Council represents over 80 million members in 138 countries. Reverend Dr. John Barrett, thank you so much for joining me. You have had a wonderfully rich career, weaving together your faith and your interest in education. How did that come about?
Opportunities come to you if you look for them, but also are aware of them, and they may come to you more if you've kind of met lots of people, talked to people. This is where it links with Widemindedness, isn't it? I mean, if you have a very kind of open approach to things, then you kind of pick up contacts in various places, and those contacts sometimes come to nothing, but they sometimes come to something.
You've spoken of your passion to encourage children to think for themselves and to inspire questioning minds. That's obviously really important to you.
Oh, surely that's what education's about. Sadly, we have to kind of keep saying that these days because two things have happened. One is that a lot of education has kind of morphed into training. Now, training is very important to help us undertake things that we have agreed to do, but it's not the same as education. Education is to encourage you to think critically, to ask questions. Why is that? Who says? On what basis? And so on. And that's how you learn, and that's how you grow. And I would have said, before you asked me, I would have said that the basic role of education is to encourage people to look at the world with wider eyes and to wonder at things that are beautiful and to question things that are curious. And if education doesn't do that, it's failing terribly.
Sometimes people say, well, religion is the very opposite of wide-mindedness. It's closed-mindedness. It's about not questioning. You obviously are so well situated on that interchange of education and theology and faith. How do you marry those two together?
It's a terribly good question and terribly important one. I'm very fortunate in that I was brought up in a family where belief in God was just taken for granted, and I inherited that. And so I would say that although I am constantly questioning a belief in one way or another, I never actually fundamentally doubted the existence of God. It just makes so much sense for me when I look at the big questions of life. They demand an explanation. And I've just found that as I was put in various situations to kind of query, now, what's the purpose of life? Where does the universe come from? Does it have an overarching kind of meaning? God has just seemed the obvious answer to that. But having said that, I am very much against a kind of unquestioning faith. I've always felt that my role as a chaplain, both at school and in college, was in a sense to encourage the faith of those who haven't got one, but to challenge the faith of those who have. And I don't know if you see what I'm saying there, because I think it's not going to be a proper faith if it hasn't been tried and tested. All sorts of aspects of Christian faith I have to remain agnostic about. I'm not a kind of able to accept lots of things that are recorded in the Bible as anything other than a kind of testimony to an experience, and therefore I'd be a great disappointment to some people who would want me to say, well, yes, certainly there was an ark and Noah got in it with his animals, and I would say I can't believe in a God who treated people like that, but I do believe that there was some kind of flood. And I do believe that there was a cause for people to reflect on that. And in some ways, some people got through the flood and were saved. And they reflected on this and decided that in some way God must be behind it. And I find myself, you know, looking at all the things that happen in our universe and thinking, well, in some way, there is a personal being who is behind it all, but I can't. As soon as you ask me, well, where is God or how do you picture God, I can't. And so AC Grayling or uh, any of the other new creationists, new atheists, would be very, very unhappy with my answer. Richard Dawkins would say, you've got a closed mind, you're immediately shutting the door. But it's not so. When I was principal of a new international school in Singapore, we decided that we would do the International Baccalaureate as our curriculum. And I wanted to do that because it is broad and it requires breadth for all students. You must do some science, you must do some humanities, you must do 2 languages, and you must do a compulsory subject. And that in that compulsory subject is called the theory of knowledge, and that sounds quite sort of specific, but actually it's really very similar to what elsewhere is called critical thinking.
Yes.
And it's really encouraging you to say, what do I hear? Could that be true? Why could it be true? What do I need to know further for it to know it's true? It takes people through all the big questions. What do I mean by beauty? What do I mean by truth? What does it mean to be human? I just thought this was a wonderful program. But when we were undertaking registration for the IB, we had an inspection, as all schools have to, and the inspecting team came and they said, how can you be the principal of a school offering the IB when you are already tied to certain answers in your faith? And I said, all of us are tied to certain answers. If you are an atheist, you're tied to certain answers. You have made your mind up that the world is this kind of place rather than that kind of place. And what we all have to do is constantly examine those answers, and they either will ring true or we'll modify our answer, or we may abandon the answer and go into a different one.
Yes.
And I've never been any different from that. My faith is under scrutiny all the time, but so far it's stood the test.
You listen to other people's opinions and you always keep growing from finding out more and using that new knowledge to question your own beliefs and opinions. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't have an opinion. That would be a very boring world indeed, I think.
Yes, absolutely. I get very cross with people who tell me that schools shouldn't, faith schools shouldn't exist, that schools shouldn't encourage people to have some kind of faith. I say, look, every school has got certain values, whether you like it or not. And there's no such thing as value neutral education. You've got to have some kind of value basis behind your education. It might be from a strong faith position, and I think faith schools should always be very broad and encourage young people to have faith, but to have a faith of their own, not my faith, their own. But if a school says no, we're completely without faith, then they've got different values which they may or may not be aware of, which are the values that underline their education. And so you're much better to be open about it and clear what those values are, and then be of course, absolutely open to the possibility that your students may reject them. But they must do it. I always said to students, look, you don't have to accept what I say, but I do expect you not just to turn it or to reject it out of hand, but rather to think about it and to come to your own view on the basis of some reasoned thought.
Well, my next question was going to be, how do we encourage young people to be more wide-minded?
I think this is the role of education. Of course, I think it's the role of parents and the family to encourage their children to have a wide-minded approach to things. But I certainly think it should happen within school. And it really saddens me that there's a tendency to kind of narrow things down. How terrible that universities, occasionally the students say, we don't want this person or that person to be allowed into the university because we don't approve of their views. No, that's exactly what a university is for, to encourage the dialogue with people who may have quite different views from your own. You approach it with a sense of respect and you argue with them. You may completely disagree, but you haven't any reason to stop them thinking as they think, unless they are, as a result of their thoughts, causing harm to other people. And I actually think young people naturally do have quite a wide-minded approach.
Yes, I agree.
But often find that stifled. Sadly, sometimes stifled in school. Sometimes they feel it's stifled by adults who may have a very clear idea of what they think their children say, should think or believe, and not be open-minded enough to talk with them clearly about what they think, what their own views are.
You mentioned the family there. What does wide-minded parenting look like?
I really do think that it's crucial that you show that you are willing to take seriously what your son or daughter thinks and says. A kind of, you will do this and you will do that because I say so approach. That's appropriate when they are young, that you do it sensitively and with kindness, but when they get to teenage, you have to sit down and say, I'm really interested in what you think about this. What do you think? And because the youngster will tell immediately if you don't really mean it. But if you do mean it and you really are interested in what they have to say, you'll find they're very willing to talk and very open to hear, well, why do you think that? Why do you think that rather than my view about this? And I find that with my own grandchildren, that, when they get an opportunity, Granddad, why do you believe in God? But you have to give them a time to come to want to ask that question and then take it seriously.
I would agree with you. I think children do not see the world in black and white. They're very naturally wide-minded. They have a very innate curiosity. I mean, if we go back to early childhood, curiosity is what enables us to learn how to speak and learn how to eat and learn how to make sense of the world. So it's really important. I think we are especially narrow-minded when it comes to intergenerational interaction. What can we do to break down those intergenerational barriers?
You have to show in some way or other that you are actually genuinely interested in other people. Because people are easily put off. I mean, you and I are. If you're kind of having a conversation with someone else and they obviously look bored or they're looking away or wondering who else they can go and talk to, we find that terribly off-putting, and so we just write them off. Young people are no different from that. There's some other factors as well, I think. One is that the world is changing extraordinarily fast. And so with some justification, they really do think that we are dinosaurs. And so they kind of, oh, Grandad, come on, get with it. So I think, but what I have to do is to show them that I actually would like to know about these things. You'd help me, tell me. So I think you have to show that you are interested. Conversation is absolutely crucial. Not to say you're wrong about this, or this, but actually just to say, look, I'd really like to talk about this. What do you think about this? Why do you think that? And let's also be open-minded and recognise that there are also some significant questions about other points of view.
How does your faith, but also your experience in life, shape your own sense of ethics? Does this concept of wide-mindedness, or what we've discussed as a spirit of inquiry, does that feature into your personal moral code?
Yes, I think it does. My faith is that we are all created by God with an individual character, and there is a purpose for each of us, and the challenge is for us to find our purpose and to discover what for us it means to take life seriously. And so that means that every other person is a person of great interest. They ought to be somebody that I really want to know as a fellow human being, and if you like, a fellow child of God. And so for me, that absolutely undergirds everything that I think about and do in terms of relationships and activities. It affects my interest in other people. It affects my concern for other people, so that if somebody is suffering in some way, whether it's through poverty, hunger, some injustice, then that should be my concern. I'm not pretending that I'm always, on the ball over this. Sometimes I have to kind of wake up to the fact that there is something that I haven't taken seriously enough. But it absolutely does affect the way in which I think about things and think about people.
You were president of the World Methodist Council. That's hugely impressive. Can you tell me more about it?
This was just another thing which just came my way. I was so fortunate. I suddenly found that out of quite a long slate of names, I had been elected, and I just had my mind blown away when I got there, because we're about 6,000 people at the conference, and we get there and they're all from different parts of the world, all speaking different languages, all there with something they shared together. And I suddenly realized, because I hadn't really traveled very much, I'd been to countries in Europe but not further afield at that stage, hey, there's a whole world out there with different people and different cultures and different approaches, but it is possible to bring them all together. And we discuss together all sorts of things. Peace has always been a key part of Methodist thinking, but also concern for people who are struggling through poverty and hunger. And I just thought, this is just wonderful. Must be what the kingdom of heaven's going to be like.
You mentioned that peace is an important cornerstone of Methodism. The World Methodist Council's Peace Award is given to individuals who have made significant contributions to peace, reconciliation, and justice. My own academic background is in conflict resolution, and I conducted my own fieldwork in Northern Ireland. And I saw firsthand there the vital need for people to talk to people who think differently from them and to listen to other people's stories.
Absolutely. There is a community in Northern Ireland called Corrymeela. Thought behind it was, let's organise conferences in school holidays and bring sixth formers together from Protestant communities and Catholic communities, and just get them doing activities together, some sport, some discussion, some games, some activities like physical activities, climbing, sailing, and so on. And they will discover that actually they quite like each other, and they're kind of just fellow human beings. And their prejudices that those people are different because they're Catholic or they're Protestant, they're different, are all just blown to pieces, and they just end up really good friends. And that's exactly what you're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just getting people together. But that's been the big challenge. Northern Ireland is an extremely good example of how important wide-mindedness is, because, as you say, it's so important to get people actually to think about the other point of view and to meet and talk. I tell you, one of my roles as president of the World Methodist Council was to award annually the Peace Prize. And one of the recipients was a Methodist minister called Harold Good. And I went to Knock Methodist Church in Belfast to award this prize to Harold Good. It was a great big occasion. And just imagine, here I am standing up at the front welcoming people, and there on the front row was Martin McGuinness. And sitting next to him was Ian Paisley's son.
Wow.
Ian Paisley should have been there himself, but was unwell and sent his greetings. But I mean, that was just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
That's what we'd been praying for ages. But suddenly here you had two apparently completely implacable ideologies brought together through the personal friendship of people and saying, look, there's got to be a way through this. Harold Good was awarded the Peace Prize because he had just been so open in going to people who were on both sides of the conflict and just saying, look, I'm not in judgment. I just want to hear what you say. And I want to tell you what I've heard from the other side. And when the IRA agreed to decommission their weapons, they were allowed to choose two people to witness the decommissioning, and Harold Good was one of them.
Wow.
And he was led under blindfold in a car to secret places to see weapons decommissioned. He had a wonderful story to tell. But what a good example of how important wide-mindedness is.
If you had to, in one line, sum up the value of wide-mindedness, what would you say?
I would say that it is the essential basis for all community. If we agree that we are not just individuals just paddling our own canoes, but are we actually either in a local sense or in a national sense or an international sense going to be able to get along with each other and grow together and do things together, we've got to be open to other people's thoughts and ideas and take them seriously and listen to them. I think that's quite a long sentence. But
Reverend Dr. John Barrett, thank you so much for joining me today. I really hope you enjoyed this episode of Widemindedness with Victoria Ball. Help others learn about it by rating, reviewing and subscribing. For more great wide-minded content, follow @Widemindedness Victoria Ball on Instagram, @Widemindedness on Twitter, and sign up to the monthly newsletter at victoria-ball.com.